Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Naruto light novel review. This is going to be a review for Naruto Sasuke's story, the Uchiha and the Heavenly Stardust. So, newly released. I actually think it's out tomorrow is the official release date, but I got it a little early here today. So, straight away, what is this? One, it is a light novel, so it's not a manga volume, so you only get like minor visuals on like the cover and a couple of little bits and pieces on the inside, but there's not too much to say visually here. It is just basically a small novel about 160-170 pages long. Specifically, what's up with the story here? This is basically part of a trilogy of novels. The first one that was released a couple of months back was Kakashi's story, The Sixth Hokage and the Failed Prince. And then the third one is going to be out in March next year in English, which is going to be called Naruto's story and the something and the Spiral Destiny. The titles don't matter too much, but the whole point is that these three are actually interlinked books. Typically, the Naruto light novels have been sort of one-off stories, or I think the Itachi novels very specifically was part 1, part 2. But in this case, they are sort of three separate stories, but they do tell an overall interlinked story about the land of Redaku and the incidents that happen seemingly surrounding this illness that Naruto gets that he needs to be cured of. And so, for the most part, it feels like the Kakashi book, the first one, went more in depth on the whole politics side of what's going on in the land of Redaku, the whole idea of the failed prince, a coup that was about to happen, and Kakashi working behind the scenes to make that happen and sort of avert war where it was about to actually happen. This book that we're going to review here is Sasuke being sent out on this mission to go to basically investigate a place where the Sage of Six Paths was said in the past to himself have gone to cure himself from the same illness that Naruto has. And so this involves him basically getting himself put into this prison, which is built on this astronomical sort of observation sort of site where they're building this telescope. And so it's basically this sort of like prison thing where they're putting them to work. But basically the idea is that the prison has a library, and in that library, because it's this specific location is historical, that is where the history about basically what exactly the Sage of Six Paths did to make this happen. So that's what he's doing here. But then there is also a plot that actually makes things more difficult than just Sasuke infiltrating the library of a random prison. And that is this really weird plot for Naruto that kind of interlinks into things somewhat interestingly, where one of the main wardens basically of the prison is just a straight up dinosaur. And it's kind of like the way the book describes it. It's kind of like, for a lot of the book, you maybe just think it's just like a giant lizard, like it's a Komodo dragon or something like that. So a bit weird, but nothing crazy. But then later on in the book, they're just like, oh yeah, that thing was a dinosaur basically. And here's a bunch of other dinosaurs as well. Because there is this plot from like the villain, and then there's a twist towards the end of the book where there's another villain involved, where they're basically reviving dragons using a reanimation jutsu style thing from fossils to support the attack that is from this book. So the reason Kakashi doesn't have to deal with dinosaurs suddenly getting involved is because basically Sasuke and Sakura managed to sort things out on this side of things. And so there is crossover across these books, because the idea is that right at the end of this book is where is the first time in this book where you actually hear that Naruto has an illness, more or less. And you also find out that, Sasuke and Sakura were on a mission to an observatory. And then with this book, throughout the book, you find that like, Kakashi's also on a mission, and they're getting gradual reports, which are basically the events of this book, to the point where you basically find out that Kakashi has completed his mission, with about 15 pages to go in this book. Now, the tie-in isn't as much as you'd perhaps think. It just means that Sakura is constantly getting updates from Kakashi on basically what's happening, because it's not just the Naruto plot. There is also the plot that is, just the war, the coup, battle for power politics in Redaku itself. So that's a little bit of an interesting one. So what it means is that, of course, the third book, being the Naruto book, is finally going to give us the backstory on, wait. When did he start to have this illness? What's going on here? How does he feel about things? And obviously by the end of this book, even though they've made progress, they haven't fully resolved everything. They seem to have half of what will cure Naruto, and the final book seems like it will be Naruto getting more out there to be involved in things. So very interesting overall. The final thing to mention before we just dive into what actually happens in this book is that this book is surprisingly, almost randomly, is getting a manga adaptation that is currently ongoing. There are 3 chapters out at the moment. It is official. It's in Viz. 3 chapters are available in English. It seems to be bi-weekly from what I can tell, 40-page chapters so far. And it is specifically the Sasuke story, the Uchiha and the Heavenly Stardust. So it doesn't seem like they're doing this, though the manga still references that something is happening with this. It seems like they're going to take little bits and pieces from the other 2 books, but focus on the core story of this, which I find to be a little bit weird. Of all the Naruto novels that you're going to do an adaptation of in manga format, you do this one? A little bit weird. There's definitely some of the novels they haven't tackled at all yet that I'd much prefer them to do, like the other Kakashi novel, not this one, the more original one from a bunch of years ago with the airships and stuff like that. That was a story I really liked and would like to see them do something with that. But anyway, really quickly, in terms of how good of an adaptation it is, the novel, surprisingly, doesn't really give you, so far at least, much backstory on how Sasuke ended up in the prison. He's just he's here because it's part of his mission, and there's only really, really minor references to sort of how and why he did all of this. And I'm assuming that's because, like the manga shows in its opening chapter, because Naruto is only going to be in focus in the last book, they will show the scene of sort of Sasuke heading out and beginning his investigation, which then results in him realizing, I got to go into this prison up near the observatory, which is the location I'm here to investigate in the first place. So the manga is I would say a pretty accurate adaptation of the novel, outside of the fact that it actually seems like it's adding in a little bit of extra, because I think if you just jumped in and did a straight up adaptation of this without any context from the other books, it would be a little bit weird. So, but otherwise, details all seem about the same. There are 3 chapters in, and by my count, they've covered about 60 pages of content. And again, this is 160-ish page books, so 3 40-page chapters to cover about a third of the book, meaning that I'm guessing that is going to be, it probably has to be either 8 or 12 chapters in terms of how they're going to collect it into the future. So we'll see how they do. But anyway, so what actually happened in this book, and how is it overall? I enjoyed it. I definitely would not say it is my absolute favorite Naruto novel. I think a lot of the other ones are kind of a little bit kind of better written in terms of the overall sort of plotting. The highlights of this book are 100% the sort of characterization of sort of Sasuke, and then the dynamic with Sakura and how they do it there. If you're a fan of this relationship, you get quite a few really nice scenes between these 2. The first of which I think you can see in the 3rd chapter of the manga that was just released a few days ago. But I'll cover some of the other stuff that actually happens here, because the mission as it starts is just that Sasuke is kind of on his own on this. He's doing what he's on his own. He doesn't know Sakura is involved in this. And so he's just in prison, kind of hanging out with his cellmates and stuff like that, trying to kind of investigate, okay, how does the prison work? How am I actually going to find a free spot to sort of get access to kind of what I need to get access to? Because it's sort of at the point now where he doesn't fully realize in the prison, like what exactly he's trying to kind of do here. He's in the right spot. There probably is information around, but he doesn't really know, like, where exactly am I going? And so it's this kind of process of gradually realizing that, okay, I need to go to the library. I'm looking specifically for a specific kind of book or a map that will have instructions, and there's some cool stuff that happens there to connect stuff together. But the main thing you get introduced to initially in the prison is that there's not a lot of guards around. And the reason there's not a lot of guards around is because they have Melo, M-E-L-O, which is initially described as just being this big lizard that hunts down anyone who tries to escape and has like poison in its fangs and stuff like that. And it just seems to appear out of absolutely nowhere. So it's this kind of guard dog like lizard that guards the prison. That's why the prisoners are allowed to sort of a relative freedom kind of walking around once they don't do anything out of line. But if they do, they're going to be hunted down by this lizard. But like I said, the lizard is revealed to be just like a dinosaur. They say at the end of the book, I think they confirm that it's basically like a young Tyranno, because towards the end of the book, this dinosaur ends up fighting a bigger version of itself. So that's kind of an interesting point. So pretty crazy to see like dinosaurs in Naruto. They've held back on that so much, but I guess it makes sense. And there's a bit of a mystery around this, because Sasuke immediately is like, oh, I'm going to investigate what's going on here, because this seems a bit crazy for just they're building a giant telescope at this observatory. Why do they have what seems like an animal I've never seen before here? So he gets out of his cell and basically just tries to have a kind of secret encounter with Melo. And so he tries to use the Sharingan on it, and it doesn't work. And he's like, why is that? Why doesn't it work on this thing? And he's kind of like, usually this should work on, like, even if it's like a summoning animal. So it must be a weird summoning animal that I've just never heard of before. And it must be connected to the main prison warden guy who's in charge of things. And he begins to become suspicious of this guy. And so he manages to get away from this, because he's actually forced to fight the thing. He uses, I think, a water style jutsu that he turns into ice, and makes like an ice stagger to sort of like scare it off. But he does wound the animal, and he thinks he's actually like giving it like a wound that it will bleed out from and die. But then the next morning, Melo's back as if nothing has happened. And so he's kind of like, huh? Like, what happened here? Is this some sort of weird thing where like the summoning completed itself and it's just a very powerful summon? And then if it is a summoning animal, the fact that it seems capable of just being around at all times must mean that the summoner has a crazy amount of chakra. So lots of mysteries happening here. There's another encounter that happens with Melo. This time Sasuke actually gets a cut on the cheek, so the poison goes into him. And even though Sasuke has good poison resistance, this is revealed to be a kind of bit of an unknown poison from like a different region he has never had access to. So he's in trouble, and basically this is where the Sakura reveal comes, in that just before that scene, one of his cellmates, whose name is, let me get this, Gigi, is like, oh, I have a blister from all the work that we've been doing. I'm going to go to see the doctor later to get it looked at. And Sasuke's like, why are you so eager to go to the doctor about this? And he's like, oh, the doctor's really pretty, and she's actually quite nice. So he's just kind of like, oh, and immediately Sakura's going to be in this, so okay, that's the case. But Sasuke doesn't think about this at all. So he's just stumbling through the corridors, and then Sakura appears before him to kind of help him out of this and kind of help get him over this. So that's a nice kind of sudden encounter, and the conversation they have here is quite good, because it's initially Sasuke being very protective of her, like, why are you putting yourself at risk by being out here? But then Sakura's like, no, you need the support on this one. as you have just told me, basically, your Sharingan isn't just getting you through every single encounter here. We need more stealth, we need more thought being put into this, so I'm here to help as well. And that's the whole point here, is that like you have this sort of like raw skill, control over a lot of action sequences that Sasuke offers, and then Sakura is mainly used here as like the perfect kind of cover here, because she is the prison doctor. She's allowed more freedom around the prison than Sasuke as a prisoner, and then she has obviously been long established to be the main sort of like book smart member of Team 7, and so that comes into play quite heavily as well. Also, so there's a few things that happen here, like Sasuke is especially I say he's forced to reveal to some of the other prisoners, his cellmates, which he seems to trust, that Sakura is his wife. But he obviously doesn't reveal the full story, and that they're not aware he's an Uchiha, but that he is a shinobi. They basically come up with this plan where it's like Sakura has, you know, feigned her way into become the prison doctor just to see Sasuke, but they obviously like use this as a mask for the fact that they're here actually investigating something. So it's an interesting one, because the reason Sasuke reveals this is because he's getting a little bit sort of annoyed and jealous that Gigi is actually sort of beginning to flirt with Sakura, and so you see that kind of jealousy kind of come out a little bit, and there's some fun scenes there, as you know, in a way Sakura isn't used to sort of seeing Sasuke like this, so she's kind of having these kind of blushing kind of moments where she gets to see him sort of almost like fighting for her a little bit, which is kind of interesting. And so from there, the investigation, what happens is that they realize, okay, one of Sasuke's other cellmates is basically the librarian guy. So they go to see him and are like, okay, do you have this book? And he's like, we do have it. Like, after a little bit of investigation, they're like, we do have it, but it's basically in the restricted section that no prisoners are actually allowed to go to. I have the key here, but obviously we will get in trouble if anyone finds out we went there. And so, because of something that Sasuke had said to her before about the fact that the prisoners like to gamble amongst themselves, she's kind of like, okay, you gamble with me, and if I win, you give me the key. But they play this different game called Starlines, and it's this kind of card game that they seem to have found basically in the library that the prisoners do like to play. And this is where we get into the core of like the lore-based mystery surrounding what actually happened with the Sage of Six Paths in the past. Is that, yes, he was suffering from the same chakra illness as Naruto. And the basic story of what happened is that he came to this area, this observatory, and met this more sciencey based guy who seemed to know kind of things. Again, we're talking about more older history of the Naruto universe. And so a meteorite then began to crash down, and so the sage cut it in half, and the idea is that there is these two halves of the meteorite out there, and from those meteorites he took these things called ultra particles, and these are what actually cured him for the rest of his life of this chakra-based illness. And so the idea is that if anyone else has the same illness as him, they have to sort of solve this mystery to find what appears to be both ultra particles from both halves of the meteorite. And so this book is ultimately about finding ultra particles from one half of it, and the rest will, I suppose, be explored, I think, in the next book, because they don't immediately at the end of this book just give Naruto the ultra particles as like that's the solution. So it does seem like you need both, or that there's something more at play here, that there's more of an investigation that needs to kind of go into this. But you basically get this interesting thing with like the zodiac. There's a couple of layers to this mystery where like the cards, there's like kind of 12 different versions of it, and they initially kind of think that like, oh, they're a bit random, but then they begin to figure out that, oh, 9 of the 12 cards represent the 9-tailed beast, and then there's one for the 10 tails, of course, and then the sage and his scientist friend basically are 11 and 12. So they begin to figure that out. And then they connect that to sort of like constellations, because obviously it relates to kind of meteorites and so on. And that connects to months, and astrology gets brought up very briefly here a little bit. But then Sakura makes the connection of this to the different hand signs you can do while weaving ninjutsu, that there's 12 of them as well. So through that, she kind of gets the order that is needed to sort of, when they find the area where one of these groupings of ultra particles is, they know how to at least get it out. So there's a few stages of this. This happens over the course of a couple of chapters, that Sakura figures out part of it, Sasuke figures out another part of it, and we begin to sort of go on from there. There's little bits of mysteries that they begin to find, that like there's an area where Sasuke realizes that they're also trying to. The main takeaway from a lot of what's happening here is that the telescope doesn't matter. It's completely irrelevant that they're digging a site for a telescope. The only thing that actually matters is that they're digging up fossils, basically, from the past, and that they're kind of being taken away and used elsewhere. And also that there's a lot of sort of like chickens in this kind of secret area kind of elsewhere in the prison that Sasuke also finds. And the connection to all of this is the whole, what is it, like chickens are the descendant of like dinosaurs or something like that. And so this is the research that's being done here to bring back dinosaurs like Mello, which is that they find dinosaur bones, they have the kind of current dinosaurs of the world, chickens, and then the big sort of twist in all of this is, I suppose, the jutsu that's being used to bring them back. Sasuke immediately thinks it's Edo Tensei, but they're like, it's a jutsu like that. They're never fully clear on exactly what has happened, but at some point in their research they do find out that Orochimaru has been here and has taken a lot of the like books of legend effectively from Redaku. And so this explains why Orochimaru is actually going to be somewhat present in the third book with Naruto, is that I guess that's the final stage of things. I'm not necessarily sure on that side of things why this is in play. I guess he's the main scientist who would maybe in present day know more about the whole chakra thing that Naruto's going through. We'll see how they actually connect everything together. But they don't in this book ever fully just clarify what the deal is with that jutsu. Just that it is some sort of a revival jutsu used on fossils, and it uses like I think chickens or something like that as their core. And by the end of the book, like there's different, like tons of dinosaurs all over the place. Like I think they say it's like pterodactyls are out there, bunch of different species of dinosaurs. It seemed like they slightly altered the names or only used like partial names towards the end. Instead of like, it wasn't like Tyrannosaurus Rex, it was just like Tyranno or something like that, and like Spino. I'm not sure if they were just trying to stay away from the kind of longer names of dinosaurs, or if they're trying to more do it like this is the Naruto version of dinosaurs. But it's, especially from the manga, if you've read it and you've seen Mello, it does just look like a standard dinosaur more or less. On that side of things, like how this ultimately sort of gets figured out is that Sasuke realizes this and realizes, okay, so that means that Mello is a revived dinosaur. So what he does is he's kind of fighting it, and he gets closer and he realizes like, okay, he can calm it down by like just acting non-threateningly and like just treating it like an actual animal, which he otherwise is good with. And so he calms it down and then really gets up close to it and just strongly uses the Sharingan to sort of disconnect Mello from the jutsu basically that was reviving it. It stays revived, but now is sort of loyal to Sasuke. So this is why they have sort of Mello on their side going into the sort of final fight. But the big twist in all of this is that the main prison warden, he's in on this, but he is not the jutsu caster. He can't do the revival jutsu, but he knows about it. Gigi is actually the person behind this ultimately. And so Sasuke's main friend, cellmate, who's been aware of things all this time, he's actually the one reviving all of these dinosaurs sort of in secret. And so as the kind of chaos of the book comes to an end, we get Sasuke and Sakura going to the lake that basically reflects perfectly the stars, which is where one half of the ultra particles are. The combination, they get it out, so they have that bag of ultra particles, whatever way they describe it. But this is right as the jutsu is activated and there's basically a dinosaur attack. And again, this is meant to coincide with the idea that this is when war is looming in the Kakashi book, which he obviously sort of prevents by like taking out like 50 shinobi and doing what he does in that book. Here, it's prevented from also including dinosaur reinforcements because of what happens in this book. So in the final kind of sequence, we obviously have this like two villains basically, and then kind of two main hero characters. So it's Sakura and Sasuke versus the prison warden guy and Gigi. Now, Sakura gets a little taken by surprise here. She gets stabbed by Gigi, who, obviously we know Sakura's going to be okay. She takes it a bit of a kind of like, she's on the verge of death at a certain point in this book because as everything happens and like the prison is falling apart, she gets full on like she's stabbed. She gets like trapped under like a pillar, all this rubble, and she really can't seem to find her way out. And it's actually Sasuke arriving to just kind of move things out of the way so she can sort of like heal herself up and get back in the fight that, gets that going. I suppose at this point I should stop to go through at least another of the Sasuke Sakura scenes. One of the other points that gets brought up in the book that kind of makes Sasuke be a little bit like more thoughtful about what's going on with Sakura is that Gigi just mentioned to him at some point that like, oh yeah, the doctor, she's cute, but she's single. And Sasuke's like, wait, how do you know she's single? Because obviously he knows it's my wife. What are you talking about? And he's like, oh, well, she doesn't wear a ring. And Sasuke's like, well, what's that about? And he has to point out that, oh, in Redaku, when you marry someone, you use the ring, highlighting that obviously in most other places in Naruto, the ring isn't necessarily an important thing as such. So again, using the whole slight jealousy angle here of Sasuke being like, she's my wife situation. He does have a nice moment where he kind of feels the need to be like, Sakura, give me your hand. And he uses this I think twice in the book. This interesting earth style jutsu where he transforms a piece of earth into basically metal and gemstone. So he makes her basically like a ring with a ruby in it, a silver ring with a ruby in it, out of just a bit of earth, and puts it on the kind of ring finger as like a kind of wedding kind of ring type thing. And it's a really nice moment that Sakura is completely taken aback that he's done this. This is where she kind of fully realizes that like, oh wow, he's a little bit jealous of kind of other people showing interest in me, and he kind of wants me to wear this. And it's just an interesting thing for her, where she's usually used to the idea that he's away for a long period of time, to the point where there's probably quite a few people who don't know that they're actually married, and this is actually just a visual thing that clearly shows she's married and she actually quite likes it, but is aware of the fact that like, because I'm a medic, I'm going to have to take it off at certain times, but this is going to be this thing that she treasures quite heavily because she's not used to sort of a gift like this from Sasuke. And so especially by the end of the book, she holds on to this, and it's like she looks forward to the day when she sort of like retires from duty, where like she won't risk losing it, basically, where she can just wear it at all times. So a fun little romantic thing to have in the book. Of course, he gets her out of the rubble and they get back to fighting. Sasuke deals with the prison warden, Mellow's fighting some of the dinosaurs, and then Sakura mainly is the one to deal with Gigi ultimately. The fighting, I wouldn't say, is particularly like amazing. There's not a lot of crazy jutsu that particularly happens in all of this. The reason the warden is in any way a threat to Sasuke is because very early on in the book you get the reveal that he has glass eyes, and so Sharingan, like that style of genjutsu, is not going to work on him. So because Sasuke can't just openly fight him until this point in the book, not a lot can happen. But the point is that the other thing here is that he's on top of like a pterodactyl or something like that as well. So Sasuke is struggling to kind of get up to him. And the warden dies because he is instructing these like resurrected animals using basically control from the jutsu. Obviously he's not the jutsu caster, but he can control them. And he basically is like, okay, dinosaurs, like attack him. But he doesn't realize that it's not a specific enough command. So he gets dropped by the dinosaur as they go into attack. And it's just described that like he just dies on impact with the ground because he was so high up, and that's him dealt with. Gigi, they managed to talk down, because this is the big reveal in the book, that like he's behind this, but it's like, why? How? It seems like you need more of an explanation here. It is revealed earlier on in the book that Gigi does have a fiance. Now, he's a little bit kind of all over the place with that because, of course, why is he showing an interest in Sakura if he has a fiance? And the reveal comes out that like a lot of what has happened here is that his fiance, as far as he is aware, is dead. And so the situation that actually happened is that why he's here at all involved in this is that he just happened to fall in love with this woman who you actually meet in the Kakashi book. And because she's relatively high ranking and he's not, it was a relationship that was sort of looked down on ultimately. And so when it was found out, he was to be punished, but he managed to sort of like get through it by involving himself in the schemes of the prison warden. And so the warden is this archaeologist who obviously shows an interest in bringing back dinosaurs, and they even bring up here dragons as well, which is really, really interesting. They do bring up like dragons from ancient times and stuff like that. It's quite interesting what the ultimate plan here is. But of course he can't use jutsu, so Gigi can. So that's why he's brought in on this as just this sort of like, if you want to at some point ever be with the one you love, you have to participate in my scheme. So that's why he's doing what he's doing. But at some point, I think, did they say it was like a year ago or something like that, he was informed that his fiancée died. And Sasuke's like, wait, what's her name? And when it's revealed, it's Sasuke's like, wait, we know this person. Kakashi has been sending us updates on what he's been doing in like Rediku, close to like the important people. And he said someone who has been very helpful to him has been a person by the same name. And this is a report from just like yesterday. You've been lied to. She's actually still alive. And so he does manage to get fully talked down. He releases the reanimation jutsu. There is a little bit of a tragic scene here where, like, as it happens, you know, I think Sakura punches away a big dinosaur right before he does it. And as he releases it, the dinosaur is like executing one final last charge forward, and he does get like badly injured. Now, they play it up like this is the death of Gigi. He's going out, and it's this kind of tragedy of right as he finds out that his fiancée is alive, this happens. But when you go into the epilogue of the book, you do basically find it, because the epilogue is pretty much the only place where you actually have stuff set after like both books so far. So you find out that the failed prince, who is now the leader of Rediku after everything that's happened, is here. You know, Gigi is on a life sentence, but he's this perfect prisoner now that he knows that his fiancée is actually alive. So it's just this kind of hope going forward that is actually going to work out. Things will be better overall. And then the book just ends with the note of like Shikamaru coming in and being like, okay, we're researching this. You know, like we haven't fully figured everything out yet. But you know, we're you know, he still wants to work even though his condition is worsening and so on. I asked them to make the analysis a priority at the Institute. If this keeps up, Naruto won't be able to use chakra anymore. We absolutely can't let that happen. So they're at the point now where they're just kind of like, okay, they bring home part of the ultra particles, but they're not quite at the point, where they're saying like it's fully dealt with now overall. They say, although they'd stopped Zansul, who's the warden, there was still plenty that didn't quite make sense to her. The sentence, the stars increased in the map of heavens, the Konoha mark, the meaning of the star that never strays, and how Zansul was able to see with his glass eyes. Any one of these might have had some connection with the Sage of Six Paths' illness, and she wanted to scrape together every bit of information she could, given the target they were facing was an unknown variable. So there is a lot of little setup moments as well, like I say, like the glass eyes, but he can still see. It's not like he's blind and just has glass eyes. He just acts like normal. So what's going on there? There's a Konoha mark on the kind of map of heavens, which is where the Orochimaru connection comes in, I think. So all this is set up for the next book, and I think there'll be a lot of that felt a little weird to end on that note. Because I would say the Kakashi book also felt a little bit weird with the way it ended as well. In terms of how they're doing the connection stuff. My understanding is that the start of the Naruto book actually includes quite a bit of backstory on when Naruto first encountered this illness, and going through basically the events of the same timeline as the event of these two books, and then we'll get the beyond the end of both of these books, because like I said, it's pretty much just the last 10 pages of both books where we finally, get through the main incident kind of section. So a lot writing on the last book, but pretty solid story. Like I said, if you like Sasuke and Sakura's relationship, you get some good stuff here. There is a nice family scene right at the end with Sarada when they get back home, which is kind of nice, and a bunch of other little scenes that I didn't quite talk about here in the video. So if you are following the manga for this, there are a few scenes that you have to look forward to. I assume some shippers will be freaking out a little bit when there's the scene where Sasuke gives her the ring. I think that will be a cool moment to see in the manga. But if you have any questions about this book, let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.